Hey, welcome. Today we are diving into a really fascinating idea that pretty much governs how we get stronger, more skilled, and, frankly, more resilient. We're going to explore why our gut feeling about slow and steady progress can actually be a trap, especially when it comes to creative work, like writing. So let's just kick things off with a puzzle. It seems simple on the surface, but trust me, the answer is incredibly deep. In both cases, you're carrying an extra 20 pounds, right? So how come one makes you stronger and the other, well, it often just leads to fatigue and sore joints? The answer to this really unlocks everything we're talking about today. You see, it really is a tale of two different kinds of weight, and understanding the difference reveals this universal rule for how any system, from our muscles to our creative minds, actually adapts and grows.
Okay, now this is where it gets really interesting. Look at how this breaks down the why. When weight gain is slow, gradual, our body is, well, it's smart, but it's also kind of lazy. It's an energy-conserving machine. So it makes these tiny little adjustments, like shortening your stride, to cope. It's basically tracking the disturbance without ever getting that loud and clear signal to build expensive new muscle. But a weighted vest? Whoa, that's a sudden shock. The system can't cheat its way out of that one. It's forced to immediately fire up more muscle fibers just to handle the load.
So here's the absolute key. It's not about the weight itself. Not really. It's all about how it's introduced. One is just this slow, creeping burden that the system figures out how to absorb. The other is a sharp, intentional shock that forces a fundamental upgrade. You see the difference? One is a passive load. The other is a true training stimulus.
Right, so how does this idea of stimulus versus passive load apply to something that's not, lifting weights? As we're about to see, it totally changes how we should think about building skills, especially a creative habit like writing.
Okay, picture two writers. They both commit to the exact same total amount of writing time over a month. Writer 1 follows this very neat, linear plan, adding just 1 minute each day. It's predictable, it's steady, and honestly, it's great for building the simple habit of showing up. But now look at Writer 2. They're on a randomized plan. One day, it's 5 minutes. The next, it's 65. The average effort is identical, but the outcome, it's completely different. This randomized plan builds the capacity to handle the chaos of real creative work. And this, right here, is the core idea of this whole explainer. Your consistent, average, predictable effort, that's what forges the habit. But it's the variance, the wild swings, the unpredictable spikes in difficulty that builds real, flexible capacity. One trains you to show up, the other trains you to perform. And this chart just makes it crystal clear, doesn't it? The linear plan, you get an A+ in consistency, in adherence. But the randomized plan, that's what trains you to handle a sudden deadline, to push through writer's block, to deliver when you just don't feel like it. You know the skills that actually define a resilient writer. It's the distribution of your effort that makes all the difference. So this brings up a really critical question. What happens when we take the opposite approach? What happens when we try to make a system perfectly safe by getting rid of all the stress, all the variability? Well, the result, paradoxically, is a catastrophe. I want you to think about a natural forest. For thousands of years, these ecosystems have been maintained by frequent, small fires. These aren't disasters. They're more like housekeeping. They burn away all the dead leaves and the underbrush, which prevents all that potential fuel from building up to dangerous levels.
But then, for decades, we had this policy that was driven by a really good intention. Let's protect the forests. Let's put out every single fire, no matter how small, as fast as we possibly can. And on the surface, it seemed to work. It made the system look safer and more stable.
But that policy had this devastating unintended consequence. Without those small, regular fires to clear things out, decades of fuel, all that dead wood, leaves, and tinder just piled up. We didn't get rid of fire, we just guaranteed that when one eventually did start, it would have an absolutely unprecedented amount of fuel to burn. And this all points to a stark and powerful law of complex systems. By trying to stamp out every single, small, manageable problem, we accidentally create the perfect conditions for one single, uncontrollable megafire. We end up removing the very thing that was keeping the system healthy and resilient in the first place. Okay, so if steady, linear progress isn't enough, and making things perfectly safe is actually a trap, then how do we build a writing habit that is both consistent and resilient? Well, the answer is to combine the best of both worlds. The solution is something called a deliberately perturbed habit loop. Now, I know it sounds super complex, but the idea is actually simple and powerful. You create a stable, non-negotiable baseline habit, and then you intentionally, periodically, throw in targeted challenges to force growth. Here's how you can actually do it in 3 steps. First, you establish your baseline. This is your carrier signal, something like, I will write for at least 15 minutes every single day, no matter what. Second, you introduce perturbations. These are specific challenges designed to build specific skills. And third, and this is key, you manage the contrast. These challenges have to be periodic, not constant. You need to allow for recovery and adaptation. And this is where it gets really practical and frankly kind of fun. You can design these challenges to target exactly what you want to improve. Want to build your writing stamina? Great. Schedule an unusually long writing session, say once every 2 weeks. Need to get faster? Do a timed writing sprint where you just try to hit a certain word count. Want to improve your cognitive dexterity? Force yourself to switch between totally different topics or styles all in one session. This quote just perfectly wraps up the entire philosophy. Your daily consistency. That's what maintains the system that keeps you in the game. The contrast between your easy days and your hard days, that's what forces the system to evolve. And the specific type of stress you introduce, that's what shapes the evolution, turning you into the exact kind of writer you want to become. So, what's the bottom line here? What does this all mean for you? Well, it leaves us with a final and, I think, pretty challenging thought that completely reframes our relationship with difficulty. The core insight, really, is that trying to create a life that's totally free from struggle isn't just impossible, it's self-defeating. Those small challenges we face, they aren't noise that we should try to eliminate. They are the system's maintenance. They're the small burns that prevent a total collapse. And that brings us to the final, crucial choice. You see, you don't get to choose between fire and no fire. That option just isn't on the table. You only get to choose the kind of fire you'll face. Is it going to be that series of small, manageable, strengthening fires that you choose to confront on your own terms? Or is it going to be that one single catastrophic mega fire that you never saw coming and never prepared for? The choice is yours.